Welcome, ladies and gents. We've had the Japanese Grand Prix and tumbleweed. The best quote of that race by an absolute country mile was Oscar Piastri at the end and said, "Is that all the highlights of that race?" Oh, what a drab race we've just had there. I mean, we had a wet, drying track at the beginning, but everyone started on the softs, and the top 10 got away absolutely brilliantly cleanly. There was no changes at all in the top 10 in terms of any changes at the start. Gabi Bortolato got a bad start, dropped down 3 places into P20. Carlos Sainz made up a place into P16. He started P15 after his 3-place grid penalty, if you've not heard about that one. Fernando Alonso made up a place, Nico Hülkenberg made up a place, but that was it. Antonelli had a bit of a slippy slide at the end of the first lap on the chicane. The big one really was lap 1. Yuki Tsunoda made a nice pass on the inside of Liam Lawson. We thought that battle would get tasty. Didn't last very long though. Lawson got a snap at the spoon. Yuki was quick to react and a nice little move on the inside of Lawson. A bit crucial for him and his race in the end because he didn't want to get stuck behind Lawson for too long. Lewis Hamilton made a nice pass on Isaac Hadjar down into turn 1 for P7, and you thought, oh, there's a chance for overtaking. The DRS looks like, it could be strong if we can get into that. And that was just sort of a false sense of security. The biggest highlight claim at lap 22 when McLaren and Lando Norris and Max Verstappen both pitted on the same lap. Red Bull had a slow stop by about a second, which meant that Lando Norris came out right alongside him. Max didn't give him any room on exit. Lando Norris went off onto the grass. They called it an expensive lawnmower in the after-race podcast when we see the 3 of them in the cool-down room, don't we, afterwards? They laughed about it. It wasn't really much in it. I expect Max Verstappen to do exactly the same, and any other driver should do exactly the same because he kept his line and is not obliged to do anything other than that. He's got to also be careful of the white line on the outside. I mean, there was plenty of room for Verstappen to move over, but why would he do that and give Norris a sniff? And it's the only sniff that he had. After that, he just couldn't get into the DRS zone, and it was probably a bad strategy call from McLaren in the end. I think they went 1 lap early for Piastri before Norris pitted with Verstappen. But why did they pit Norris on the same lap as Verstappen? He would have seen Verstappen go in. Why did he not carry on? Because we've seen the guys go really, really long. Kimi Antonelli especially went the longest, didn't he? 30 odd laps on the mediums, and it worked kind of all right for him. He was quick, very quick on the hards. In fact, at the end, closing down his teammates by at one point about 1.5 seconds a lap, which was cracking pace from Antonelli at the end. And the one going longer in the first stint seemed to have worked for the majority of the drivers. And I think that's the biggest criticism we can have there. But we'll get to them when we get to the 3 good and the 3 bad. And other than that, we've seen Carlos Sainz had a nice move in the race. He got past Nico Hülkenberg. Jack Doohan also, he had a good strategy call as well, went on the softs, and that worked really well for him at the end. But although running long, it didn't really work out in the sense of where his track position was, and it was all about track position this race. Interestingly enough, we've had 4 races, 4 different P1 pole position starters and 4 different race winners, and we're concluding the sprint race in China on that one, which just shows if you get it right on the day, in qualifying, in the race, it's anyone's game. It's small margins, and that is set, and hopefully if this trajectory continues, we should be set for what should be a brilliant season in the end. Hopefully better races than this one that we've seen today, but I'm sure they'll come. This was unique in the sense that the tyres just seemed to last absolutely forever. The only issue was sort of keeping the tyres in in operating conditions in terms of them not getting too cold. There was no issues on wear, and it was a comfortable one-stop strategy. And it was just whether you can do it on raw pace, and the cars in race conditions seemed so closely matched. And Japan, if they put a DRS down that long straight before the 130R, I think there's a chance then you can follow through 130R and pass into the chicane. Other than that, it's very, very difficult to pass into turn one unless there's a big deficit in pace between the two cars. And I think that showed in this race particularly. Let's get to the 3 good and the 3 bad. Max Verstappen won, didn't have the fastest car this weekend, but he put it with a brilliant pole lap. I was having this debate with my brother yesterday that Max is going to win this race, and he was like, no, he's not got the car. McLaren's will chew him up. It won't be good in his tyres, and it won't happen. But I was so confident that Max would do it, because if he got into turn one first, he'd just be able to manage the 2 McLarens behind him, and he did absolutely that. He had the skinnier downforce wings, so that helped him down the long straights, so kept the McLarens out of DRS. He had good traction out of the chicane, and Norris never got in Max Verstappen's DRS, I don't think, once throughout that whole race. Behind him, though, Oscar Piastri was right up behind Norris, got into the DRS a couple of times. Down into turn one, it was a bit close for Oscar a couple of times, but given it's so close between them 2 drivers, they're not going to make a lunge on each other. But Max controlled it absolutely brilliantly well. This is why this championship, and he is still in this fight to become the 5th 5-time champion of the world, because he's just absolutely brilliant. He pulled it up on a car that was nowhere near looking like it would be at the front at all at any point in the weekend, until he pulled that lap off in qualifying. And in the race, he just managed it absolutely brilliantly well. It worked in his favours that the tyres weren't ever an issue throughout the race at all, to be honest with you. So that helped him massively. But now there's just 1 point in the championship between him and Lando Norris. Lando Norris still leads the way, but this guy is going to be hunting, and they'll make up for every slip that McLaren make. This guy, the Lion from the Dutch Lion, will be right there behind and snapping at the heels. You can't make mistakes. McLaren made, they didn't do the best job in qualifying, and they made a mistake in strategy, I think, to put any pressure on him. And you've got to do particularly well to put some good pressure on Max Verstappen and for him to crack. And for the Red Bull team to make mistakes like that. The only mistake that really was made was that slow stop for him, which could have proved costly, but it didn't in the end. And Max drove absolutely brilliantly, which we know he's absolutely more than capable of, because he's brilliant. Second of the 3 good, I'm going for Kimi Antonelli. He held off Lewis Hamilton really well after the stops. Hamilton just stopped 1 lap earlier, was on the 1 compound softer tyre than him. And I thought, if Lewis gets past, I think there was the only sort of person that he thought Lewis would pass in the race was Antonelli, just because of potential experience. Antonelli held him off really well, and then after that, he bridged the gap to Lewis, and he was closing hand over fist over George Russell. I think George Russell was panicking a bit, looking in his mirror, thinking this kid's going to come and pass me. Another couple of laps, 1 more lap, he was definitely in the DRS zone, and I think he would have passed him because he just had the much better tyres, the hards. He was absolutely brilliant. He was flying on them. A really, really solid job. He's been so impressive, this kid, as a rookie. He's right up there with his teammate. He finished less than a second behind him in the end, compared to other teammates that have moved teams and other rookies or non-rookies. This guy's been the only one that's gone in, and he's absolutely brilliant and really, really close to George Russell, pushing him, in fact, towards the end of this race. And I hope he can carry this on into the next one. And the third of the 3 good, I'm going for Jack Doohan. That's a bit of a surprise, but he did make up 4 places in the race from his starting position of P9 to finish P15 in the end. A good recovery after a difficult start to the weekend. He had that big crash in practice, but steadily pieced it back together, and he was just 1 place behind Gasly. I think he could have potentially kept Carlos Sainz behind, but Sainz was mega on them softs in the end. and he made the one-stop work. I mean, he went on the softs and started on the softs, which worked so badly for Lance Stroll. I mean, he finished last in the end, did Stroll, and I'll get to him later on, but yeah, unlike Stroll, he managed to just get that second stint get onto the hard to make that work all the way right to the end. I think he did actually really good job in the end. He can be fairly happy with where he finished his race, because that was pretty good from him after a bad start to the weekend. Jump to the 3 bad, and I'm starting with the first of that, is the McLaren strategy call. They did nothing but to help anyone. Jacques Villeneuve in commentary was absolutely brilliant. McLaren have to want to win here. I mean, that just summed it up, because the strategy call, I think it was, they thought that maybe the undercut would probably be stronger. Piastri was one of the early ones to pit. And then it wasn't really much faster, and they should have seen that. And then they pitted Norris and Verstappen at the same time. Why they didn't just let him run on? We've seen it worked well potentially in Antonelli's car. Yes, he might have lost a bit of ground, but with better tyres he had some chance. I'm not saying he would have gone on to win, or any of them would have gone on to win, because Max was brilliant, but they never gave themselves the opportunity to try something different. They had 2 cars that could have done, and they split strategy. They did that potentially with Piastri. Either or, let Piastri run wrong, do one or the other, but they did neither. They just went for the standard strategy. They followed home Max Verstappen, and that's what they got. They never really, and there wasn't really much risk either in Norris going long. There wasn't like there was big tyre wear issues or big differences that we've seen, and they would have seen from other guys pitting early, coming out, and the pace just wasn't really always there coming straight out, so there was no major benefit of the undercut, for example. So in fact the overcut worked for more than others, so why they couldn't and didn't see that earlier is a little bit disappointing. Why they just didn't even try anything different at all to try and throw a 6 and make Red Bull think on the feet of like, question it, have they gone wrong, make Max Verstappen potentially push on his tyres early just to, think, oh, am I under pressure here, what do I need to do, just think, potentially cause a mistake, but they never did that at all, and it's cost them a win. McLaren were the fastest team this weekend, there's absolutely no doubt about that. There's nobody that can tell you that Max Verstappen had the fastest car. He didn't. He just absolutely made it work. He was brilliant in the end. McLaren had the fastest car over the 3 sectors in Japan. Had they nailed that in qualifying, they had the fastest lap by far, a couple of tenths at least. In the race, it's difficult to follow. We've seen with these cars before. This is not a surprise. And they had to try and do something different on the strategy. They didn't, and it backfired. So yeah, they need to, and I'd hoped they'd learn from being battle hardened from last year. We said that all last season, and it doesn't seem to have registered with them yet. They need to just be a little bit more dynamic, a bit more on the front foot, a bit more of the aggressor to say, look, we're the champions, and we're going to go and win this Drivers' World Championship for one of our drivers. And they've opened the door. Max is now just 1 point behind Norris, and the way this season's and it carries on this way, it could be anyone's to take at the end. And Max Verstappen and Red Bull, like I said, I don't expect them to be this poor for too long. The only downside for Red Bull is that the other guy in the other car is struggling, and they're going to struggle to hold on to or get close in the Constructors' World Championship. But who knows the way this is started. It's early doors and anything can happen as the races go on. The second of the 3 bad, I'm going for Liam Lawson. His experience with Red Bull, a Racing Bull strategy call, but it just didn't really work for him at all. He went long, but it didn't work for him like it did for others, which was strange actually. I wouldn't say it's a complete wrong strategy, because I've sort of said others should have done that, but yeah, not sure where it went wrong for him. He finished 4 places down from where he started. I actually absolutely don't know, because the other guy in the other car did an absolutely brilliant job in Isaac Hadjar. Come home with some solid points finishes, and Liam Lawson, after a decent enough qualifying, just wasn't there in the race. I'm not really sure what went wrong for him there. He'll be disappointed though, and he can hope he can bounce back next time out in Bahrain, and he's not got long to wait for that. Third of the three bad, I'm going for Lance Stroll. He got a bad start. The only guy to do two-stop strategy. Yeah, it was a bad strategy call to go on the softs early doors. That didn't work. He pit lap 10. But from there onwards, he didn't... I'm surprised they didn't go long, or why they didn't go long after that, which was this big strange one, really. Why did they not go for a long stint? He pitted, again, lap 30 plus, so he did only look another 18, 19 laps. On them tyres, so I'm not sure really what his issue was, if he had other problems at all, but he was the only driver to get lapped in the end. And yeah, the Lance Stroll we know has returned again, sadly, because he's had a good start to the season, and this has been a particularly poor race for him. Finished plumb last in the end. But there we have it. 4 races, 4 different race winners. Max Verstappen took this one by the scruff of the neck. Japan, he was saying, is my track, and I'm going to absolutely dominate this one. He absolutely did that. He was brilliant, to say the least. And there we go. Good news is that the race should get better from here. Let's hope so. We go quickly into Bahrain so we can forget this one and move on in terms of racing action. Max Verstappen won't be forgetting this one because it was a brilliant drive from him. 1 week to go before we head to Bahrain, and then Saudi after that, and that will be really interesting because that was the place we've had all the testing coming into the season. I can't wait for the action to get going there. That should be brilliant. And we can't forget about this one quickly. Watch out for the driver ratings video coming shortly, and the Bahrain preview shortly after that. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment. As always, see you on the next one.